In this video, we're going to take another look at variables like we did last day. But this time I want to show you something called the scope of a variable, how long a variable is valid for. So in this program here, I'm going to get the user to enter a length, and then they're going to enter the width. And when I press the calculate button, what's going to happen is it's going to display in label 3. So for example, I can create a variable called DBL width. I'll create another variable, and you'll remember to create a variable we use the keyword DIM. And I'll make it a data type of double. And as you remember, the double data type means it can be any number with a decimal pretty well. And then I'm going to make the area another variable. And what I'm going to do is when I click the button, I'm going to say the length is equal to whatever value was in text box 1, the text of text box 1. And I'm going to say the width is equal to the value, so whatever number was in text box 1's, text box 2. The text of text box 2. And then finally area equals length multiplied by width. And then lastly, me label 3 text is going to equal area. So when I press play, the simple program, if I had a square that was a length of 3 and a width of 5, it would be 15, which is just fine. So the variable works in here. Watch what I'm going to do this time if I didn't declare the variables. So if I don't declare the variables, you're going to see at the bottom a whole slew of errors. And it's going to say you didn't declare the variable, so it doesn't know what length is, it doesn't know what width is, and it certainly doesn't know how to calculate area by multiplying the two of them together. So it's important that we always put the variables inside of our subroutine. Let me show you something else I'm going to do. I'm going to make another button that's going to do the calculation. So I'm going to go back to my form, and calculate worked. But I'm going to make another button called demo, or I'll just... And in this button, I'm going to say that the area is equal to the length times width. Notice there's lots of squiggly lines. It says it doesn't know what it is. And when I press play, it says there's errors, so it won't run. And so I say, okay, no problem. I'll just declare those variables. And I'll declare the variables here. That will get rid of the errors, so there's no errors here. And so when I press play, I'm going to do the same thing. So I put in 3 and 5. And when I press calculate, it says the answer is 0. So I say, oh, okay, well, it's calculating length times width, but I didn't know what length and width were because I hadn't pressed the calculate button. And you'll see here in the button, I assign the length and width to the text box. So you'll say, okay, no problem. If that's the way it is, I'll hit calculate, and then I'll press this button, but I still get 0. Why is length times width 0? Doesn't seem to be anything but 0. So then to do some debugging, what I might do if I was doing some debugging, I might copy this and paste it and put it here and say, okay, now in button 1, I'll do the calculation that worked before. And in button 2, I'll do the calculation and see what happens. And when I press play and I put in 3 and 5, okay, it worked like I expected. But when I press button 2, it still says length times width is 0. But it's the same thing. Double area is length times width. And the reason boils down to this. So sorry, a long-winded approach on it. It's called the scope of a variable. And here's what the scope of a variable means. When I have a variable, if the variable is in this section here, means that it's declared here. I can use it. I can put information into it like this. Here's the assignment statement. I can do calculations like I did here. And I can then take information and put it into a label like I did here. But as soon as n sub happened, this is a local variable, and what happens is the variable is destroyed. It's all the variables in here are ended, and they all will equal a value of 0. So when I go in here and make another variable, even though it's the same name, when I go to do a calculation, it has no idea what the values were up here. And so that's called a local variable. Another way we can do this is creating a global variable. And we try not to use global variables. And so what I can do here is inside my form, I can put the variables here. And then when the sub ends, the variable's still active. So what happens is when I press play, when I put values in here, it's calculated. And if I go to this subroutine, the values are still active. If I was to find out what the value of the length is, it still knows it from the other subroutine. So that's because it's a global variable. Why is a global variable dangerous? And so here's why we tend not to use global variables. This program's small and simple. But imagine a program of 1,000 lines of code or 5,000 lines of code. You're not going to know the names of variables. And quite often, we use the same name in multiple places in a program. And so if we use the same variable and it's global, we could accidentally get misplaced values, and it can be hard to correct. So whenever possible, try to put your information locally. Now the next type of variable I want to show you is not really a variable. It's called a constant. And sometimes I might make a program like this program here. I might have a circle program, and I'll say enter radius, and I want to find the circle, the area of a circle. So if I had this program that calculated the area of a circle, what I might do is in this program, the formula to calculate the area of a circle. So I might create a local variable called radius. And I might calculate a variable called area. And to calculate the area is area, oops. Oh, didn't notice that. Okay, sorry. Area, DBL area, is equal to pi times radius squared. For those people that are good at math. So to calculate the area of a circle, I say area is equal to radius times pi, and it doesn't know what pi is. Aha! So I'm going to go here to where I would normally put a global variable, and I'm going to create a global constant. And that global constant, instead of using dim, I put the keyword const, C-O-N-S-T. And it's like the dim, except for whatever variable. I create a variable called pi, and I'm going to say it's a double variable, and it's equal to 3.14. And now I've got a variable called pi, and it's okay to put this in the general declarations because it's a constant. I don't even have to worry about that because anytime I use pi, it's declared here. And I can't change pi. I can't go down here and say pi equals 7 or 45. It says you can't do that because it's a constant, so it's like a variable, but it's locked at that value. And it makes your program easier to read. So I can use it here. I can go pi times the radius squared, pi r squared, and perfect, there's a formula. And then finally I can say that the area is equal to, the label is equal to the area. And so I press play. Oh. I don't need anything there, so there's no errors. I press play, and I say the radius of 5, area of a circle is 0. Oh, I didn't say what radius was. Oops. So I was too quick to radius is equal to text box 1's text. That's right. So I press play, and if I say the radius is 5, area of a circle is 78.5. Now, last thing I'd like to show you is in the label I just put the variable, but sometimes I want to combine text and a variable. So what I'm going to put in here is in quotation marks, I want to say the area of a circle is, and then I want to display the area. But when I do that, there's an error. And that's because to join a string in something, you can't without using an ampersand. So if I use the ampersand, it's going to take the string and it's going to join it with the variable. And so now when I press play, I put a 3 and I calculate the area of a circle, and it says the area of a circle is 28.26. So the ampersand is how I combine different things together. So I've shown you that as well. And that's really all